I've never taught my students anything. I just try to put them in the best conditions to learn. Albert Einstein. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first webinar of the Knowledge Path Agenda 2021, an initiative by Diapath Knowledge Academy. Diapath is a leading company offering a complete range of innovative instruments, reagents and consumables for anatomic pathology. Diapath Knowledge Academy offers educational webinars dedicated to lab scientists, anatomic pathology professionals, anatomopathologists and students. The Diapath Knowledge Path includes 5 webinars, starting from this first one, up to May 2021. We are glad to introduce you our teacher, Dr. Antonella Savio. She will later introduce herself. Thank you very much for the precious cooperation. As you know, Diapath is approved CEU's provider by NSH, National Society for Histotechnology. If you're interested in gaining CEUs by NSH, you're welcome. You're invited to follow the instructions under the website www.diapath.com/webinars-list. Before starting the webinar, just a few practical information. The webinar is about 30 minutes. Then we are going to have a question and answer session at the very end of the webinar. Thank you. Now let's start with the webinar. The evolving role of the biomedical scientist. The UK experience. I leave the floor to Dr. Antonella Savio. And thanks.
Let me start by introducing myself. I'm a histopathologist with more than 30-year experience in Italy and in the UK. I first moved to London in 2008 after more than 20 years in Italy. So far, I've been working in 2 different Italian hospitals and 3 different specialist hospitals in London. I actually work at the Royal Marsden Hospital, an oncology center in central London. From when I first arrived in a histopathology department in London, I noticed that there were some differences between the roles of the lab scientists in the UK compared to what I was used to see in my country. For example, the lab manager was also responsible of the organization of the secretarial work. The lab scientist dedicated to the immunohistochemistry was also in charge of choosing antibodies, instruments, the kind of control to put on slides, and was also checking all the stained slides at the microscope. You could feel that the relationships within biomedical scientists and consultants were more relaxed and collaborative compared to what I was used to notice in my country. However, up to very recently, I tended to consider all the figures with white coats working around me as if they were at the same level, while I've discovered that they had completely different study paths, career roles, and professionalism. I discovered that the careers offered to the lab scientists in the UK are extremely diverse and complex. And I understood it at first hand when I approached Paola, who is responsible for the immunohistochemistry sector in our department, with the question, Paola, can I interview you to explain to the Italian lab technician the difference between their roles in Italy and in the UK? And she seemed irritated and replied simply, I'm not a technician. This pushed me to try to understand why Paola was so kind of offended. And I was looking at first in the internet, and at the beginning I couldn't find many differences. I was looking at this site and incumbencies, the salaries were more or less those of the Italian technicians. So I decided to ask Lee for help. Lee is in our department the person that is in charge of training and career progression of scientists, and he provided me with this complicated scheme in which I could orientate myself only with his help, which is illustrated in this slide. We'll come back to this slide more in detail later, but at first sight we can understand that Those who graduate as biomedical scientists can have three main professional paths: clinical diagnostic on the left, academic university path on the right, and managerial path in the center. Another thing that is immediately evident is that there is a specific professional register, the Institute of Biomedical Science, and that once graduated, an apprenticeship is required in order to get the registration and to be authorized to work in this role. Another thing that we can easily deduce from this scheme is that there is an alternative path to those of strictly university studies to get your degree. In fact, you can get already addressed job roles that allow you to have time to also study and obtain your degree while working. This is a possibility that in the UK is not only offered to those that want to become biomedical scientists, but it is offered in general for those that already got a family or simply they are earning their living and that want to progress through a course of study in their professional career beyond the canonical age considered apt for study in it. It's the employers themselves that make available apprentice positions that you can access if you had already done a scientific course of study at the secondary school and also had obtained a satisfactory final assessment. As is said, you become a biomedical scientist by working towards achieving the role. In this way, those who had obtained a less specific degree, a degree, let's say, in science in general, can also start working and then have access to obtaining the specific degree in biomedical sciences and the registration with the professional association. This is the case with Paola, who emigrated to England when she was still very young and who will later tell us all about her journey towards the position she currently occupies within our department. In the UK, in order to access a scientific course of biomedical sciences, you need to have already had a scientific course of study at the secondary school and also a good degree. The overall final grade of the secondary school is a condition for entering any faculty. For example, in order to enter the competition for the available places in the Faculty of Medicine, you need to have obtained a higher degree than that, allowing to apply for the Faculty of Biomedical Sciences. However, people who started a professional career as a biomedical scientist can thereafter attend specialization courses, acquire qualification with their professional experience, and also have the opportunity to access medical courses where, with supplementary exams, they can later obtain a degree in medicine and start a different professional career. This is the path that Ashley will tell us about later. For those embarking on a career of a laboratory scientist, a pathway with subsequent steps is offered involving different roles and qualifications and also different salaries. The first step one can climb is that of a specialized biomedical scientist. This is ratified by a specialization diploma issued by the Institute of Biomedical Sciences. One can thereafter progress and become a senior biomedical scientist, which involves the responsibility for an entire sector of the laboratory or a specific activity. To obtain this, it is necessary to go through a master's course of study or an equivalent years of experience and training. One can still proceed to the top position represented by the consultant biomedical scientist in the clinical diagnostic path or the equivalent lab manager in the organizational managerial path. A different issue is that of the cervico-vaginal cytologist. pathologists that in the UK is very different from what it is in my country, in Italy. The qualification of cytoscreeners does not involve a degree, but only some training courses. The cytoscreeners report only cervicovaginal cytology and prepare all the rest of the cytological specimens, including fine needle aspiration. This pathway is completely separate from that of a biomedical scientist, and as we will see, the remuneration is also completely different. Obviously, all these steps have different levels of remuneration, and as we can see, the level of remuneration gradually grows for the first steps and then soars for those who can reach the further steps, represented by bands 8 to 9. In fact, we can see that in band 8 there are 4 further subdivisions where the salary increases steeply. A consultant BMS band 9 achieves salaries that are completely comparable to those of medical consultants with considerable experience and years of career like mine. The cytoscreeners, on the other hand, have much lower salaries and little opportunities to increase it. The traditional career options for BMSs include special role in the national health system, dedicated either to the management or to the development of special expertise, and responsibility roles in special sectors, including immunohistochemistry, information technology, quality, safety, and so on. Options for BMSs are also offered outside a public health institution, including private health centers, education, research, or a role in the development of health industry products. But the real change has come with the acquisition of some roles traditionally exclusive of the medical doctors that have been introduced in the last 10 to 20 years. It was the need of replacing the work of the pathologists that has opened these new opportunities for biomedical scientists as soon as a shortage of pathologists began to be noticed 20 years ago in UK. The same shortage of pathologists is now occurring in Italy in recent years. This need has resulted in a significant opportunity for BMSs who started to report cervicovaginal cytology in 2002 and thereafter were authorized to dissect surgical specimens of increasing complexity. It was in May 2017 that a joint document was released from the Institute of Biomedical Sciences and the Royal College of Pathologists, recognizing and ratifying the possibility for BMSs to undertake a training program enabling them to report histology specimens. The training program provided by these two joint registers is rigorous and it takes 4 steps, each one lasting at least 12 months, with a final assessment by a joint commission composed of pathologists and biomedical scientists, representative of both bodies. This training takes place within the departments and obviously it requires collaboration from pathologists and biomedical scientists. It is strongly discouraged not providing those who undertake this path with sufficient time for training and studying, to the point that a grant has been recently put in place to overcome possible work and cost obstacles and encourage those wanting to pursue this goal. Those biomedical scientists who manage to pass all the 4 levels of training and education acquire the title of consultant and are recognized of being able to report independently without supervision. They, at this point, will work in team with the pathologists. Like pathologists, they will be able to report their cases, to discuss the cases in multidisciplinary meetings and take part in teaching and clinical audits. As with the pathologists, they will take part in external quality control of reporting. Is a testimonial from Pratik Kumar, a biomedical scientist who started his careers in the 90s, and says, "During my time, my role as a scientist has progressed and evolved in ways I never ever imagined." And he describes that in 2012 he started his 4-year training in gastrointestinal pathology reporting. After being awarded the advanced specialist degree in 2016 in reporting gastrointestinal histology cases, he then followed all the approval steps up to become a consultant biomedical scientist able to report independently. In this interview, he expresses a very good point, which is it is important to look at these clever and innovative ways of working in pathology, both to provide motivation for existing laboratory members and staff and to attract those approaching to choose a path of study and work to these new professions. To help me explain this change and maybe inspire some of you, I've asked 6 biomedical scientists to help me with their testimonials, 4 of which work in my same department. I'm going to introduce them to you. High up on the left is Ashley, who works in my department and does gross examination and dissection of histology specimens. He also suggested me to interview her wife, who also is a biomedical scientist but works elsewhere. Emma is undertaking the path to become able to report histology specimens. This kind of position is not present in our department because most of our cases are very complex oncological cases. More than half of the cases I report are review of diagnoses made elsewhere from other pathologists. Therefore, for this purpose, an expert medical consultant is needed. Then there is Ala, who immigrated from Sudan when she was 11 with her family and has been working with us for 2 years. We couldn't miss Paola, who helped me with her irritation to understand. She is the lead of the immunohistochemistry sector. We couldn't miss Glenn, our lab manager. Finally, Christina, a young enthusiastic biomedical scientist who has already done a considerable amount of vocational development between Italy and the UK, finally landing on a less usual professional. This slide, we can see how are placed our 4 biomedical scientists in our department. We can notice that Glenn, the lab manager, has also responsibility of the secretarial staff. Ashley and Paola are both band 7, but while Paola has reached the top of her career, Ashley is going to move to band 8A, which recognizes his activity of specimen dissection. Ala is very young, but she's already a band 6. We now hear Ashley, who wanted to become a doctor and at some point realized that his career was already there at his fingertips as a biomedical scientist.
I think I first wanted to become a lab scientist towards the end of school. I'd always been interested in medicine, and to be honest, I'd wanted to go to medical school from probably my mid-teens, but with various commitments to sports and things towards the end of school, my grades just weren't quite good enough to get into medical school. So I started looking at alternative career paths, and one of the courses at university that struck me was biomedical science, which basically encompassed a lot of the academia associated with medicine, but prepared people for a career in laboratory medicine as an alternative. So it was interesting to me, so I applied for that, and that was the route I went down. So I think, yeah, that was probably the first time I considered going into laboratory medicine. I think for me, becoming a laboratory scientist has been a really good opportunity. Whenever I first got my trainee biomedical scientist position at Oxford University Hospital, I did put a lot of time and effort into it. So I did focus myself as a trainee to get through all the required knowledge and get the portfolio completed within the first 12 months, I could become a state registered biomedical scientist in the minimum possible time. So that required a lot of extra work where, most days I'd work from 9 till 5, go home for maybe half an hour to get some dinner, and then I'd go back to the library for perhaps 3 hours that night. So yeah, there was a lot of dedication had to go into it, but at the end of the day, I managed to do it and get through it within 12 months and became state registered. So it was all worthwhile in the end. Along the way as well, I think it's all a case of luck, whether opportunities to progress in your career kind of present themselves at the right times. For me, I was always lucky. And I said as soon as I had become state registered, an opportunity presented itself to become a team leader and actually run a team within the laboratory. So I took that opportunity as well. I then undertook a master's degree at university to further my education a little bit more, and then on completion of the masters I took another opportunity to become a senior biomedical scientist and actually run a section of the laboratory. And at that time I decided to run the specimen dissection area because specimen dissection was something that I was interested in. So then I did that for about 3 years while considering whether or not to go back and re-enter medical school and become a doctor. But after giving it some thought over a considerable period of time, I decided that the opportunities were presenting themselves within biomedical science here in the UK. So yeah, I decided to abandon the plans to go to medical school, and I actually applied for a job at the Royal Marsden in London to train to become an advanced practitioner in specimen dissection.
Paola's path is different because she started with a non-specific science degree, and then she was able to gain her degree in biomedical science by working in a department. Paola's story is a successful story, a story that started from a very different life experience, a story of personal growth supported by the opportunities offered in the UK to those who want to improve their position through a course of study as a mature student, even when they are not anymore spring chicken. Now Paola is band 7 and she's head of the immunohistochemistry team composed of 4 BMSs. Let's hear her.
I left school in Italy just after the media, and because I didn't know what to do, so I came over to England. Then I ended up meeting my husband, got married, and never thought anything about it. And it's only when I got divorced that I thought about joining a university and study again. So I did my A-levels in this country, and then I followed my BSc and my MSc. And in the meantime, prior to joining the NHS, I did work as a wine advisor for 7 years. I found out about a career in biomedical sciences when I joined the NHS as a medical laboratory assistant and started studying for a BSc in natural sciences with a specialization in biology. And when I joined as an MLA, I realized that if I continue with my BSc, I could have become a biomedical scientist. So I contacted the Institute of Biomedical Sciences, I submitted my degree, and upon that I was told that if I were to do just like a gap course, which practically was the first year of the MSc in cellular pathology, that I will be accepted as a trainee biomedical scientist. My role in the department at the moment is leading the immunohistochemistry. My immediate team is about 4 people. It's not just the running of day-to-day immunohistochemistry, also sourcing new antibody, working up new antibodies, dealing with, well, at the moment we are going through a new tender for acquiring new machine and providing a new service, also training new members of staff, work close contact with all the pathologists, especially when we are working up antibody. I'm also involved in buying all the stock.
British people are very practical. Their study paths incorporates theory with practice. At the end of their course of studies, graduates in UK are able to work. Unlike in Italy, where newly graduates have a big background of theory, but they have to learn how to work from scratch. Nevertheless, I didn't think that an equivalent work path was valued much more than a master's degree. Let's hear what Hala has to say.
The lab that I'm working in now is not a training lab, which means that if you want to do your specialist portfolio or if you want to do your registration portfolio to become a BMS or then a specialist BMS, you can't do it here, which is unfortunate. It depends where you work. A lot of the places now are training labs. This place is kind of rare in terms of not being able to train. But if you are in a place that trains you or that can train you to progress, then it will be wonderful. It's to become a Band 6, which is a specialist. It can either be that you do your specialist portfolio. You have to basically gather evidence to say that you're capable of working as a Band 6, which is like a specialist BMS. You can either do that specialist portfolio or you can do an MSc. But some places they say that because the MSc is not really specific to what you do. So for instance, with the modules that I chose, I tried to be specific to histology, but it's not as specific as a specialist portfolio would be. With a specialist portfolio, it's literally in the name, it's a specialist to what you do, a specialist to each discipline. So you might have a histology portfolio, you might have a biochemistry portfolio, microbiology portfolio, etc. So it really caters to exactly the work that you're doing, whereas the MSc, not really. So that's why a lot of people don't really look, I don't think they look highly on it, because nowadays you can find anyone who's done an MSc, but it doesn't really mean anything. So your experience as well, it matters a lot. That's why with some places, if you just come with MSc, they'll just turn you away and say, oh, it's just an MSc.
The professional path of Christina starts with a course of studies in Italy, then continues in the UK with a work experience in a hospital in London, while completing both specialist portfolio and master's degree. Thereafter, the decision came to measure herself in a very different sector. Let's hear.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina D'Amico, I am Italian, and my career as biomedical scientist is complex. After completing my study in Italy and obtaining my bachelor degree in biomedical laboratory techniques in 2011, I decided to move to the UK because I wanted to improve my English and also because I wanted to expand my knowledge with an international experience. My Italian degree has been acknowledged by the Health and Care Professions Council without the need of a registration portfolio, which is essential instead for UK biomedical scientists. In fact, the 3 years Italian course degree includes an intensive practical training program in all specific disciplines, allowing students to be registered straight after graduation. After my graduation, I worked for 6 years at St. John's Institute of Dermatology, which is one of the world's leading centers for patients with skin disease. I started in 2014 with a Band 5 role within the Histopathology Department. During this time, I developed a wide range of skills required to be a competent biomedical scientist. And thanks to the laboratory manager and training officer support, I managed to complete the specialist portfolio in cellular pathology. This portfolio gave me the opportunity to develop further my theoretical and practical knowledge in cellular pathology, and also it is a necessary requirement for career progression. Right after completion, I have been promoted to a Band 6 role within the department. With a Band 6 position, I was assigned more responsibilities, such as performing internal quality control checks and following and supporting trainees, and an increase in salary as well. For 2 years, I was given the opportunity to present 2 different projects at the IBMS Congress in Birmingham, and that was a great experience to me. The St. John's Institute of Dermatology is one of the main referral centres for both general and special dermatopathology, and it's running 5 days a week service for Mohs micrographic surgery. What is Mohs micrographic surgery? It is a precise surgical technique in which the complete excision of skin cancer is checked by microscopic margin control. It offers the highest cure rates while maximizing preservation of healthy tissue. The principles behind it were developed by Dr. Frederick Mohs in the 30s, and it's a surgery recognized as the treatment of choice for high-risk basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. One of my responsibilities in the lab was to process those frozen sections for Mohs surgery, a task that requires high skills and an intensive training, especially for the difficulties in the orientation of the tissues, which is an essential requirement for a correct diagnosis. In 2018, I decided to undertake the Master in Cellular Pathology at Greenwich University, and in 2020 I decided to apply my knowledge and experience to the role of product specialist in the commercial field, joining the Italian company Diapath for a new challenging career experience. The multiple projects I was part of in the last 6 years helped me to develop a strong interest in technology and research, especially for laboratory equipment and reagents. It's very interesting to see how innovation can be applied to histology processes, considering that some of them are still manual work-based and remained relatively unchanged for the last 100 years. Working in the Innovation Department at Diapath will give me the opportunity to contribute in finding new solutions aimed to improve and standardize histology processes, which are now required to be absolutely safe, fast, without compromising quality. And this is something that makes me proud.
Generally, the people I interviewed gave me the impression of being satisfied with their choices and career paths. Let's hear what Emma, who's training to report histology cases, has to say.
I think that becoming a biomedical scientist has been a great choice for me, in that it gives me a career that I thoroughly enjoy. It's challenging every day. Every day is also slightly different, and I think that in general it's a great career to get into, as I feel that there is a good pathway to progress if you wish to, and work your way up through the different levels, gaining experience and expanding your knowledge as you progress. I've been a biomedical scientist now for 13 years, and I started off as a trainee biomedical scientist, and I've then been lucky enough to able to obtain my MSc. Felt that I'd reached a point over in that department where I'd progressed, and felt that I couldn't really progress any further based on what I wanted to achieve professionally as a long-term goal. So I decided to move to the Norwich Hospital, which I'm currently based at, and the department that I currently work in is very forward-thinking, very biomedical scientist driven, so I've managed to again expand my knowledge, progress up the professional ladder. I feel that there are lots of places that are looking at biomedical scientists for future advanced roles, so I do feel that this is an interesting career to go into.
Paradoxically, the only one that showed some regrets is Glenn, the lab manager, who declared being sorry that these opportunities for career advancement were not offered in his times, because both dissecting histological specimen and reporting histological cases would have interested him much more than becoming a manager. Let's hear his words.
When I started in the profession, lab managers tended to be the person that had worked there the longest. People just moved and it wasn't necessarily on ability either. And also, as I moved up the career ladder as well, that we didn't have advanced practitioners in dissection, we didn't have biomedical scientists doing reporting, so you really only had two options if you wanted to progress to the higher levels. One was to go into management, or one was to go into immunohistochemistry. I'm not entirely sure I had a passion for management either, but I thought I was a pretty good lab BMS and I was a pretty good people person. So I kind of fell into it that way. I think it was the only way you could progress to the higher levels, because we didn't have dedicated managers. It's changed a lot now. I think now we're still looking to promote biomedical scientists into the lab manager's role, because I think that's important. But what they tend to do now is they give them a lot more coaching and a lot more training on the management side. They never did when I first started in the job role, and so I think that's a good thing. It's a big advantage if you understand how the lab works and the issues in actually delivering the service at a very basic level. It makes it much easier for you to understand and to plan the service.
How the biomedical scientists see their future in the histopathology department. Let's hear what Emma says. And
I think that the future for biomedical scientists is looking very promising. When I first started, which wasn't that long ago, so 13 years ago, none of the BMSs were doing specimen dissection, so that has progressed massively. My current department, BMSs are doing 95% of the dissection, which is great and kind of really good use of biomedical scientists' time. I think it's quite fulfilling because as a BMS, you do your degree and then you often do an MSc. You're also doing specialist qualifications at work to help you progress. Having these advanced roles, including dissection and reporting, does make the role very fulfilling for BMSs, especially those that don't want to go down the route of management, which used to be the kind of only way to progress and work your way up the ladder. If you wanted to be a kind of senior BMS, you would either go into something like IT or management, whereas now there are these advanced roles which many people are wanting to undertake, which is great. And there are lots of biomedical scientists in loads of different departments around the country that are all undertaking these advanced roles. So I think that one of the major driving factors for especially the reporting qualification is the reduction in the number of histopathologists coming through. We are seeing a massive shortage of consultant histopathologists coming into our profession, which means that there is a gap that needs to be filled, especially if we can't recruit the numbers of junior doctors coming into our profession when we have quite a lot of pathologists that are now reaching retirement age. And there is going to be a massive deficit. So I think it is really good that we are using biomedical scientists who have advanced knowledge and skills and are dedicated to the job roles that they are doing, that would fit into these roles so easily and be a valuable part of the pathology team. I think that more and more biomedical scientists are going to be involved in the histopathology reporting scheme. So currently in the UK now there are reporting schemes for gastrointestinal, skin, and also gynae pathology. So I wouldn't be surprised if more specialities come on board. Those three specialities are the bulk of our workload in a histopathology department, so it makes sense that those are the first ones to be rolled out. I can see in the future that more of the specialities could be rolled out for biomedical scientists to report.
And at this point, I cannot do anything else than sharing Paola's opinion, with which I thank you for listening me today.
Little by little they are replacing the pathologist.
I'm very glad to invite you to the next webinar, The Journey Towards Quality in Histopathology, which is due on the 11th of February 2021 at 10 a.m. or 4 p.m. CET. You're welcome. Subscribe under www.diapath.com/webinars-list. Thank you for joining. In the next days, you are going to receive a link to the slideshow via email. Thanks.